to share with you 3 myths about poverty in New Zealand.
Myth number 1. There is no poverty in New Zealand. There are some people that truly believe that there is no poverty in New Zealand. The truth is, there's a lot of poverty in the midst of prosperity in New Zealand. We are a prosperous nation. There is lots of us that are doing really well. But there is also lots of us that are doing it really hard. There are 682,500 people that the statistics would tell us that are living in poverty in New Zealand today. That's about 1 in every 7 households. That's huge. That is really huge. Some of these people people groups are really overrepresented in this group. So, for example, if you look overall, you have an overrepresentation of Māori and of Pacifica, and you have an overrepresentation of sole parents. Because the reality is, in these days, to get on and do really well, it often takes 2 wages. So myth 2, there's plenty of help around for those who need it. The fact is that there's not really enough help when you need it. Benefits are there, and benefits are great. But even at the moment, those benefits do not allow a family to feed, clothe, and house themselves adequately. The PIP report found last year that the disposable income of food bank clients, most of whom were reliant on benefits, was barely sufficient to cover the estimated food costs that they needed to feed the family of 2 adults and 2 children. That left nothing over for any of the other household costs. You know, and agencies are being stretched to the extreme, especially as we have come out of post-lockdown. You know, I know that families are struggling to feed themselves. Agencies like the Food Bank and in the Salvation Army, they are doing so much more than they have ever done before. Myth 3, if people budgeted properly, then they wouldn't be in trouble financially. You know, that's the myth. It's all their fault. But you know, the fact is that even with the best budgeting skills, they still cannot make the ends meet. I remember doing CAP with a lady last year, the budgeting course. I'll tell you, she had better budgeting than I did. I looked at what she had left over after she had paid her rent. And it was not a huge rent. It was only, you know, a little public housing type place. But what she had left over after she had paid rent, I'm going, how on earth do you survive on this? That's why they are struggling. You know, often we assume that it's because they're wasting money on alcohol and cigarettes and all the rest of that. And certainly that can be true for some of them. But for some families, it is simply that they do not have enough money to meet their needs. I'm not talking about even their wants. I'm talking about their needs. The food, the clothes, the housing. You know, often people who are stuck in this poverty cycle are so much better at budgeting than the rest of us. So why am I telling you this? Well, we've been looking at the traits of Wesleyan DNA. You know, what is it that our history has been? Where has it gone? And so the last one that we're looking at today is this ministry to the poor. So over the last 5 weeks, this is the last one. Next week you get Neville. Neville's is going to have a really great sermon for you. But over the last 5 weeks, we've looked at The Creator's mission. The mission of God is to come and to seek and save the lost. Right from the word go, that was his mission. He is the God that leaves the 99 sheep safely in their pastures and goes searching for the one. And that was important for John Wesley. Let's go searching for the one. Salvation. This is Christ alone that saves us. And every single person needs to be saved. Every one of us has that need in our life to be saved. Transformation. God doesn't wait for you to clean yourself up before he says, come on in. But once you do come on in, he transforms you to be the person that he wants you to be, to mirror his image. Last week we started looking at the means of grace. And actually the ministry to the poor and the means of grace working really quickly, really tightly together. Because if you remember last week when we were talking about means of grace and we talked about means of piety, which was the prayer and Bible reading and communion and ways of receiving God's grace. Well, there's another way that we receive God's grace. And that's what Wesley termed the works of mercy. And that is the ministry to the poor. That is what we're doing. How do they know that there is a God out there that loves them? One of the ways they can receive God's grace is when we are actually helping and serving them. You know, we read Matthew 25 before. And John Wesley took those words very, very seriously. When he said, Jesus told his people that they would feed the hungry, give the thirsty a drink, visit the prisoner, visit the sick. John Wesley said, that is what we're supposed to do. Are we supposed to do it to save us? No. It's not going to save us. But we do it because that is what the people of Christ do. That is what you do when you have put on the mantle of Christ, of Christianity. You know, earlier this year we talked about, in one of our other sermons, and we had actually looked at Matthew 25 a little closer, and we talked about Wesley ministering to the poor in detail, and I don't want to go over all of that again. I just want to give you some quick reminders, because, you know, sometimes we forget. Some of the things that Wesley did. You know, John Wesley went round collecting money. The week before he died, he was out in the cold in England collecting money to give to the poor. He set up schools for children that couldn't afford to go to school. He set up microfinance loans. So he would buy the wool and organise for these women who had no way of surviving to come and to knit it all up, and then they could sell the produce, and then that would sell the produce, and then they got to keep that money to live on and buy the next lot of wool. But it was, you know, John Wesley gave them that money to start them off. He visited the sick. He visited them in hospitals. He visited them at home. He encouraged other people to do them. He actually said to the wealthy, high-born ladies, don't just go visiting the high-born ladies, go and visit the poor. Go sit with them. Go hear their stories. He visited the people in prison. Remember the last time we talked about the fact that he went and he found a whole heap of French prisoners, because it was during the French wars, that had been left in this big open field and their clothes were rotting off them. And he reclothed them totally and then came back in 12 months' time and did it again. He didn't just provide money for these ventures. In some ways, that's the easy bit, providing the money. He spent time with the poor. in serving them, and he encouraged others to do so. You know, for Wesley, ministering to the poor wasn't just something that he did once or twice a week. It was something that impacted the way that he lived. You know, it's really easy to go, okay, well, I'm going to go and I will volunteer at, I'm going to pick on Red Cross, not because I'm picking on you, Denise, but because it's a well-known one. I'm going to volunteer at the Red Cross, or I'm going to volunteer at the food bank, or I'm going to volunteer at something, and then I'm going to go back and live my life like I want to live my life. Wesley didn't do that. He started off that way. But then one day he went out for dinner, and this poor girl was shivering and shaking, her clothes falling off her. And he thought, I need to give her, she was serving him his meal. He thought, I need to give her some money. And he checked his pockets, and he didn't have any money. Didn't have any money because he had just bought a picture for his wall that day and had spent the last of his money. And that really, really hit him, that he could not help the poor because he had bought something frivolous. And it forced him to look at himself and go, well, how do we spend our money on ourselves when others have nothing? So this was his response. He decided, well, what is money to me? It's not important. When his income was £30 a year, now remember this is almost 300 years ago, he lived on £28 a year and gave away £2. That's not too bad. Over the years, as he became more famous and he was writing lots and lots of books, his income went up to £60 a year. He survived on £28 a year and gave the rest away. Later on, when it grew to £120 a year, he still lived on £28 a year. They mustn't have had inflation in those days. He still lived on £28 a year and gave the rest away. It's interesting. You will never find a portrait of John Wesley in a wig because he actually decided that it wasn't worth the money to spend on a wig. It was better to give that money to the poor. You know, even more striking than John Wesley's own work on behalf of the poor were his teachings about why Christians should engage in these actions. And central to this teaching, he believed that Christians are called to live a life of holiness. And that is the overflowing love of God and our neighbour. That's where this comes from. It is not to earn our way into heaven, but we have these hearts that overflow with love for God and our neighbour. And he believed that God's grace empowers both acts of love for God and neighbour and transforms not just the lives of the people that we're doing it for, but actually transforms our life as well. So that means of grace, it actually affects the people that we're doing it for, but it actually affects me. As I'm doing that and giving out to people, I'm actually growing closer to people and to God in the process. You know, put a little bit differently, Wesley said that we're to act on behalf of the less fortunate for two reasons. God called us to do so. Lots and lots of scripture in the Bible where God says, take care of the orphans, take care of the widow, take care of the poor. And you see that in the Old Testament, you see that in Jesus' teaching, you see that in the New Testament with the early church, and they were out there doing it together. So God calls us to do it and we need to be obedient to God. That's the first reason to do it. And the second one is that these acts of mercy help us to grow in our own grace of God. 1 John 3, verses 17 and 18 says this. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. You know, John, just like John Wesley, ties what we believe into the way that we act. I can say that I love God, but unless I am actually actively loving my fellow man, then John would go, do you really love God? You know, unless there's this vertical relationship and this horizontal relationship. And sometimes we want just the vertical relationship and we want to ignore the horizontal relationships with other people. And John goes, no, you can't do that. You have to, the way you treat everybody out here reflects what your love for God. It's not enough to say, I love you. Be well with you. Have a great day. God says, prove it. Prove it. Show me that you love me and show me that you love other people by the way that you treat them. It's not enough just to say, oh, poor Geraldine. She's going through such a tough time at the moment. And, you know, she hasn't been able to eat more than one meal a day for the last week. Poor Geraldine. What are we going to do about it? You know, Wesley believed that this care extended just beyond caring for those that needed food and clothing. Now, it's great. And today, in our world, it actually becomes so much easier because you go, the government's got it. The government's giving them benefits. The government's supplying the Salvation Army with lots of food at the moment to give to all those that are poor and needy. Food rescues coming here, they give them bread and stuff. Is there anything else that we need to do? But Wesley would go, it's not just the poor as in food poor or material poor. What about the poor in relationships? What about the poor that just need to have a friend? To have somebody come and sit with them? What about the poor that don't have any peace of mind and need somebody to listen to them? What about the poor that are spiritually poor, that don't have that? What about the poor that haven't had any forgiveness in their life and they desperately need to know what forgiveness looks like? What about the poor that actually need some shelter? Now, we can't do everything. And even John Wesley went, we cannot do everything. And it was not that he was trying to do everything. He set up a lot of things. But the problem is bigger than just us. But we need to be doing our part. John Wesley said it this way. He said, do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you can. Let me say that one for you again because it's a bit of a mouthful. Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways that you can, in all the places that you can, at all the times you can, to all the people that you can, as long as you can. You know, I think I can safely say that our church does this pretty well. When I look at what is happening here in the life of the church, and I listen to also what's happening in the lives of different people throughout here, I see a lot of this happening. So we have the drop-in centre, where people, we've just started, where people can meet and just come and sit and be friends. And one of the things that made my week last week was when Riwa came in on Friday morning. She said, "Kathy, I've been waiting for this all week so I can beat you again at Triomino's." But I won this week. You did. You did. We had the Tahahi team that goes out and just sits and listens and talks to people that have been victims of family harm. Or will do. We've only managed to do one visit after 3 times on the team yet. Something about our team. But we are going to do it. Too much we actually had different ones, yeah. We have Let's Get Together, where the elderly just come and they can be together. We have mainly music, where the young come. And these mums and dads and grandmas who have the challenging role of raising their children can come and do something fun together and engage with their kids, but also engage with each other. That's awesome. We are looking at putting together a soup kitchen. We have a pile of food at the back there that is to go across to the school to provide for families that are in need. We have different things that are happening. So I'm not trying to go, let's do more, but let's remember why we're doing it. Let's remember why we're doing it. And let's take the words of Galatians 6 verse 9 to heart. Paul says to the Galatians, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Are there times that you get tired from doing works of mercy? I know there's times that I do. There are times that you can feel discouraged and discontent. Times that you can wonder, is it worth it? Am I making any difference whatsoever in anybody's life at all? But Paul says this, don't get weary doing good. Don't stop doing it. John says if you have material possessions and you see a brother or sister in need, he wasn't actually saying this to the church, mind you. He was saying this to individuals. If you see a brother or sister in need, what are you going to do about it? You may not be able to solve all of their problems. In fact, it takes away a lot of their dignity if we try and step in and go, we will solve the world for you. But we can walk that journey with them and help them walk it day by day. We can help them out when we need to. Why? Not because we're goody-goody Christians. But yes, because we love God and we love man. And that is who God has asked us to be. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I know even as I wrote this, it challenged me with the way that I spend and the way that what I do. Lord, forgive us for all the times that we hoard our riches. Give us your eyes and your heart to see those around us that need ministry. Whether it is a food parcel, whether it is just sitting and talking to somebody, whether it is sharing their despair, whatever way it is, God, will you help us to be ministers to our community, each and every one of us. Amen.